Hello. I'm Jimmy Chan. I'm your friendly neighborhood Holy Bible explainer. My channel is Food for HNM. We're continuing to read Esther 5. Esther's request to the king. Remember, Esther could have been a big, fat, ugly chick. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne. In the hall, facing the entrance, when he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and he held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you, if it pleases the king," replied Esther. "Let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once." The king said, "So that we may do what Esther asks." However, perhaps she was heavy, so she knew how to make food. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition, my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Haman's rage against Mordecai. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife. So Haman's wife is Zeresh. Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, 75 feet, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. So Esther 6. Mordecai honored. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officials or officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. The king said, "Who is in the court now?" Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honor. Have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, one that the king has already worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" So it sounds, like I'm a guy, so I don't like to wear clothes that another guy has worn, Like if a woman wears the guy's jacket, then they're like dating or they're married. You know what I mean? Like when you see a married couple walking around and then she's like, "I'm cold," then give me your jacket. Sometimes the guy's like, "Oh, okay, you can have my jacket. You can wear my jacket because you're cold." It sounds like this. Like Haman's idea was, "Oh, okay, I'll give you a dumb idea." Because sometimes they gave the king bad ideas, not good ideas. Take a robe that you wore, it sounds like a jacket on a girlfriend or a wife. But, sometimes a guy, you have to wear hand-me-downs, like your older brother or like your uncle or like someone in your family, has clothes and you wear them and then you don't like them, like as soon as, sometimes they're nice, like you couldn't buy them at that time, but usually as soon as you could buy something, of your own, you just throw it away. Okay. "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe." Okay, do it for Mordecai. "Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." So in an earlier video, I said that doorway guards always betray. They always do something like that. So the king knew, when Mordecai told the king was probably like, "Yeah, I already know, I know." They want to kill me? Well, I know they would do something like that. So he put something like that on him. "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. Okay, so verse 11. So Haman got the robe and the horse. Okay, and then verse 12. After Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors. And his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him." You cannot stand against him means you can't stand him. You will surely come to ruin. That means already back then, people thought that Jewish people are very difficult, you know, they're very irritating, and then you will surely come to ruin, like they're a curse. You know? That's what Zeresh is saying. Jewish people are annoying and a curse upon you. Verse 14. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Let's look at verse 6. Haman thought, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So Haman thought that the king wanted to give or do something for him. I'm not really sure about that. Let's look at Esther 7. Remember, these books are translated from a different language and from a long time. These stories are from a long time ago. Esther 7, Haman impaled. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? Then Queen Esther answered, spare my people, this is my request, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. And then King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman realized that the king had already decided his fate, staying behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Who has dared to do such a thing? To try to kill all the Jews? Esther 8. The king's edict in behalf of the Jews. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king. For Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor, And if he is pleased with me, let an order be written. So, just to overrule, and how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see destruction of my family? King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther. And they have impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you. And seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So the signet ring is like for signing. Signature. No document in the king's name sealed with his ring can be revoked. At once, the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. These orders were written in the script of each province, in the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. Mordecai's orders. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city. So Mordecai wrote that in every city they have the right to assemble and protect themselves. To assemble and protect, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Assemble and protect. Destroy, kill, annihilate, attack them. And to plunder the property of their enemies. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The triumph of the Jews. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white. He was wearing blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness, and honor in every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came. There was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. And many people of other nationalities became Jews. So if you kind of respect them, become Jew. Kamju. It seems like they didn't like abuse them, push them around. Became Jews. To convert is to become, just like not push them around, abuse them, or push them, abuse them, but they like to abuse them or push them around. Kind of, because remember, the religion is not really a religion, but it's business. If you like kind of copy them, no, like you eat someone's food, you eat Chinese food, sort of like something. Say like, Alright, let's think about it later. Esther 9, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them, the Agagites. So let's see what an Agagite is. Haman was an Agagite, but what is an Agagite? Descendant of Agag, or a symbolic term for an anti-Semitic Amalekite. Okay, King Agag of the Amalekites. So Haman was like a Amalekite. Usually it's like Uriah the Hittite. So it's Haman the Amalekite, but he changed it to Agagite. So King Agag of Amalekites. So people forgot he's an Amalekite. Yeah. So King Xerxes, super secret. You have to read in between the lines. He realized, because there was there's Haman and his wife Zedesh, remember? And then the doorway people, they were called and Zippish. No, wait, hold on. Come on, that's why a book is, you just turn the pages faster. Internet is slow sometimes. So the doorway people, the ones who guarded the doorway, they were called Big Thana and Teresh. So it's like Big Thana and Teresh, and then it's Haman and Zeresh. Big Than, Haman, you know what I mean? Big Thana, it says here, Big Than, Big Than and Teresh, and then there's Haman and Haman, there's Ahaz, and then there's Haman, there's Haman and Zedesh, So there's a theme of gayness in this, Somehow, maybe Haman had a twin brother, and that was Big Than, and then his wife, Zedesh, had a twin sister named Teresh, and then, it's like spooky, one acted poor, and then they like wanted to become King Xerxes's officials or guards, like soldiers. And one wanted to be richer and try to be his advisor. And then one wife pretended to be the richer brother's wife, and then her twin sister pretended to be a guard, which is like Mulan, like a woman dressed up like a man. So when King Xerxes realized, because kings are usually very smart, sharp. Big Than sounds like Haman, and Teresh sounds like Zeresh. Then he was like, I think I have to kill Haman, and I just trick him like that, trick him, because I know he has set up the pole, and I have to kill Haman. So let's look. Where were we? Okay, we read the triumph of the Jews. Triumph. And we read that the fear of Jews has seized them. But it's more like they didn't push him around, Other people didn't push him around. But the other nationalities, we were talking about the nations. I talked about the 7 traditional enemies. People like Canaanites and Philistines didn't push them around. Now, there's another day. Enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. Okay, so no one could stand against them, and Mordecai was prominent. His reputation spread, and he became more and more powerful. Jews struck down all their enemies with a sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandatha. Sounds like Indian. Indian man? Dalphon. Sounds Indian again. Aspatha. Paratha. Adalia. Aridatha. Panashta. Arisai. Aridai. And Vaizatha. The 10 sons of Haman, son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews. So it's possible that Amalekites are related to India, the country of India. Indian people, the enemy of the Jews. So in the past, Jews and Indians were enemies, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men. 500 men. And the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted. If it pleases the king, Esther answered, to give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles. So the king commanded that this be done, and an edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled, I thought they're dead already, the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar. They put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. They did not lay their hands on the plunder. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, again, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observe the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Purim. Remember, pur is lot up, like a lot, pur. They cast lots. Purim established. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, at the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, remember, it sounds like an Indian man, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast a pur for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had devised against the Jews should come back onto his own head, and that he and his sons should be impaled on poles. Therefore these days were called Purim, from the word Purim, because of everything written in this letter, and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them. The Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom. All who should join them without fail observe these 2 days. These days should be remembered in every generation, and these days should never fail to be celebrated by Jews. So every Jew should celebrate Purim because of Mordecai. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter concerning Purim. Perhaps if every Jew in the universe does not celebrate Purim, then once again it could happen to them. They will be completely killed, destroyed, and annihilated. Which is what I think the Lord Jesus wants to do to them, because they asked for his crucifixion. You try to kill me, I'm gonna kill you. So Queen Esther wrote to confirm the second letter concerning Purim, and Mordecai sent letters to all the provinces, where the Jews lived, to establish Purim, and as Mordecai the Jew. So who is not Rothschild? Mordecai is the Jew. Well, if Jews reincarnate, maybe that really rich guy Rothschild, the richest Jewish guy in the world. Maybe in a past life he was Mordecai. So I established a forum, and Esther decree confirmed these regulations as written down. So, sort of like Mordecai, let's just spell cast. Mordecai cast, right, the lot. Cast the custom, and Queen Esther bound the lot, and bound the custom. And if either one dies, like Mordecai or Esther, then this protection that the Jews have will be gone. But now that we are of the resurrection, if Rothschild is dead, then this decree is uncast or unbound. So, I'm a prophet. One day, I think all the Jews will be killed, destroyed, and annihilated. Because, not every Jew celebrates Purim. They don't. So, one day it'll happen. Maybe all the Muslims are going to just blow them all up. I know that sounds dark, but you want the real story. These books, they're not just fun stories. Let's keep going with Esther 10, the greatness of Mordecai. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Thank you for watching my video, beautiful. I guess the way I say things is catchy. Thank you for listening to my video, me in this video. And remember, keep God first. He'll take you places, and believe in the Lord Jesus.